So this game is Trailblazer. It's a metagaming microgame. Microgame 20. I don't know what that means. I guess that's the number in the series of microgames. These were really cheap, like $3 or so each or something when they originally came out. Now, well, it depends on the game. This particular one was kind of hard to find. But it came recommended to me very highly for, hey, here's a game with an awesome economic system. Yeah, I'm not so convinced of that. If it was, it would be truly exciting. But I'm not intending to play through a whole thing of it, but I want to go over the rules, give you the intro, and then at least get a little bit of play in so you can see what the economic system works like, and I can see it a little better. I've already played around with it a little bit, and see if there's anything really there. But this game, in essence, combines a few things. You start off with a few starting planets that are on the board. You don't really need the counters because they're written here as well. There's an optional game where you throw those counters into the cup and you discover them, and blah. But it also has this large playing area that's all empty space, and in any of the empty spaces, even the ones near Earth, you could conceivably find other valuable planets, and those you draw from the cup. And you generate what goods can be produced there and what can be sold there and all kind of stuff like that. Okay, great. Now, in terms of economic model, it's got not a perfect bar to reach for. It's got games like Star Trader, the SPI Ares magazine game, which per in about the same cost, honestly, and Merchant of Venus, Crusoe's Planet. Star Trader has a similar system to some of the old Avalon Hill economic systems, things like business strategy and executive decision, which is actually 3M, which operate completely on a supply and demand track. Star Trader is a little different, but it's basically, hey, I want to sell these products or I want to buy these products, and how much, how much money do I get off of them? The Avalon Hill and 3M games had a production aspect to them, in the sense that you bought goods and produced things from them. So you had like this combination of the cost of the raw materials versus the cost of the finished, versus the price of the finished product that you could get, and that was where it kind of handled, instead of just buying and selling stuff. Buying and selling stuff doesn't make any sense on its own usually. I guess you could do futures markets or something like that. But there you're traveling through time, right? Here in Star Trader, you're traveling through space in terms of you want to deliver goods to where they're needed. Well, this has the same core concept with some real awesome ideas, like I can sail out anywhere, find new planets, and there might be, the board's going to change, and there might be all kinds of different things there. All right, let's jump into the rules and see how well it handles it. First of all, it's got counters for 4 players. You could conceivably, play this in like 10 players, and it might have some interesting effects by going to a very large number of players, actually. What you're going to need to do is kind of what I have written up here, which is for each planet that's discovered in the game, you have a list of what it produces, this price multiplier, which seems to increase the desire of the planet to produce a good. Current production, which is how many of that unit are going to be produced in the current turn. And then you also have what it consumes, which are going to be, at least in the starting planets, a different set of goods. I'm not sure if they are in the finishing. You have a demand ladder, which I haven't really looked at too closely. If that'll come into play, but it looks like the higher the demand letter, i.e. the closer to Z it is, the higher a price they're willing to pay for the good. It has a modifier to the demand, and it's got a number that they're willing to buy. The modifier to the demand kind of cancels out however many you're selling there. So that's going to be something of the, even if you sell a whole bunch there, as long as they have a high modifier to the demand, they'll keep wanting more and more. The demand's not going to change by much, though, on any given planet. The production also isn't going to change by much on any given planet on any given turn. You also need, in addition to one of these records for every single planet, so I've got 5 planets to begin the game, but who knows how many there'll be eventually. So this could eat up a lot of paper and involve a lot of, flipping through pages of this stuff. I'm not planning on playing very long, so I don't expect I'm going to use up much more than maybe another sheet of paper. Over here, each player has a quarter of this page. This is the ship record sheet. And each player is going to start the game with 3 fleets and 3 ships. And they probably want to make each fleet its own ship initially. Although you are limited by countermix, I guess. So eventually you might make bigger trading fleets for whatever that's worth. There's no combat in this game. You also have factors, which are these pyramid type things. Those are sort of like, well, the fleets have a certain carrying capacity. The factors are just people who are capable of dealing in the goods, and they can store any quantity of goods with them. And then you have the home planet, which sort of works as a factor, but it has some additional effects on play. Okay. The sequence of play is fairly simple. Wherever you have a presence, either a fleet, a home base, or a factor, you're allowed to bid for goods. And the way that works, in essence, is we go through the goods one at a time. Okay, we can avoid going through the ones nobody's interested in, but essentially you go through the goods one at a time on each planet, and there's no real definition of how you choose the ordering. So you might have to put a mechanism in play for that. Like there'll be a market player who controls the order each turn or something like that. Star Trader has something like that. They don't define that much there. They just say in a mutually agreed, situation, order. It might be that one player has a real reason to want something to go first. But here's what's not going to happen. It's not a game where buying and selling is happening at the same time, although you are allowed to trade with each other. But so it kind of doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the order of these, in the sense that the things that you're putting up for bid might be, you might not get them, and you might have excess money afterwards, or you might not sell everything when it comes to the sales side. So you might have excess goods at that point. But you're never going to be put in a position where, shit, I was planning on buying this, I had a bid in on it. Programmed in the way you do in Star Trader, and I got undercut, and now I don't have the cash for it, and that causes problems. There's nothing like that in this, because purchasing is done at the beginning of the game, and sales is done at the beginning of the turn, and sales is done towards the end of the turn. Okay, so the way purchasing is done is you pick a good, right, by mutual consent. You pick a planet first, then you run through all the goods there. You pick a particular good, and anybody who wants that good can offer a price for it. Prices are in whole numbers from 1 up to infinity, basically. And whoever bids the most, you're technically supposed to announce how many of them you want as well. But whoever bids the most can buy as many as they bid for. Whoever bids the second most gets as many as they bid for. In all cases, this is limited by the production number for the bid. And I don't know if this is visible, but I've got little numbers in here on each planet. Assessing all the information that is present even on just 5 planets is kind of tough. But okay, so after a product is completely, sold, however many units of it people want to pay for up to that limit, then you're going to determine the effect on the price. We'll go into that in detail later because that's sort of the meat of the system, but it's also kind of funky and it's not trivial. It involves a lot of charts and things. Then you're allowed to move, and again, we'll go into more detail later, but the idea of movement is you count up a number of movement points from where you are to where you want to go with a particular fleet. And movement points cost 2 to cross horizontally or vertically, and 3 to go diagonally. And that represents a pretty good estimation of what the distance on an even scaling is across a square grid. You count up that movement, you roll 2 or 3 dice. If you have only transport ships, you roll 2 dice. If you have a scout present, you roll 3 dice. If you end up rolling equal to or under the distance that you're trying to travel, you've sort of failed. And you roll to see where you randomly travel instead. And you'll randomly travel anywhere from 1 to 6 movement points from where you started. Which means if you try to go a long distance, you're just not going to go where you want to go. You're going to randomize somewhere in the vicinity that you're in. All right. After every ship has moved, and that's, I think, done in a randomized sequence each turn, then if you've got scouts in empty spaces, you get to go through the exploration routine. I'm not really familiar with this. I've read through it. But you basically roll. If you get something, if you succeed, you draw a chit from here. That'll be the success chance is based on how close you are to a discovered world. You draw a random chit from here, and it'll have a type of world, and then you'll be able to generate the world's production and demand from that. Now, some of the worlds can improve and change over the course of the game, and some of them cannot. Okay, now everybody's where they want it to go, you hope, or somewhere else or whatever, and they're allowed to start selling goods at this point. And the way sales work is you don't get to set your price on sales. You declare how many you want to sell. And then there's a mechanism in place which will determine what price you get based on how many are being sold. And in the consumption, there's a number that they want to buy. And that'll be the limit on what you can have there. After that, you pay a maintenance on all of your stuff, and basically all of your things cost you $5 each. Keeping track of money on paper, you could use chips, you could whatever, but it seemed easiest on paper, given how much paperwork there is anyway. Okay, setup for play. Each of the companies starts with the same thing in the basic, in the standard scenario. There's sort of a basic scenario where everybody kind of starts the same too, but there will be no exploration in that game. And then there's a supposedly advanced game where you get rid of these 4 systems and everything's by exploration, which means you start out only with scouts. And what I see it as is more of a random setup, and I think it's more interesting to get some of the merchant capabilities going rather than, oh look, I'm the guy who got lucky and found something, because there's not a lot of ways to compete with somebody who has an income advantage, who has a capital advantage on you. They're going to be able to do a lot. So I think probably the standard game is the strongest of the games out of it. Anyway, each player has a factor. The one thing that differentiates them is where their factor is, and they each have one of the other 4 planets with a factor in the standard game. I've mostly talked about the production. Let's take a look at how this works. So you use the supply and demand table. Yeah, half the book is tables and charts. Half of it's tables and these charts that you keep track of things that I don't want to photocopy. So, okay. So, when you're buying stuff, you're interested in the supply, and what you do is you take the current production number that's being made. So, like, let's say we were doing germ here. That's germplasm. The current production would be 4, so there's going to be a -4 to the die roll. You look at the demand modifier. Nope. You look at the average sale price, which is, if anybody bid on it, that's the price that people were getting for producing it. And that average sale price gets multiplied by the price multiplier. So, for example, if I paid $1 each for germ plasma, and there were 4 current production, okay, the price multiplier is also 4, so my $1 each would be multiplied by 4, and I would have current production is -4, average sale price is 1 times 4 is 4. So I would end up with a 0 on the die roll. I rolled 2 dice. With a 9, I would get a +1, so there would be 1 more produced next turn. Even though I'm giving them crap prices, the price multiplier is high enough in comparison with the production that they're willing to keep producing the same amount. Now, it's possible production can drop down to 0. It's also possible that it can rise. You don't bother rolling for anything that nobody's dealing in. Now, this is a real problem. If nobody's buying anything, you would think the production would cut down. Nope, it stays perfectly fine, which means that you optimize on one commodity and then you move to another one if you overburden that market or whatever. Okay. That's one of the first problems I see with it. The game kind of says, yeah, it would be too complicated to roll through all of these. Let's just deal with the ones that we're playing with. Fair enough. So we get a difference in the production for the next turn off of that. And then we move on. I gave the rules for movement already completely. Exploration. Exploration is kind of interesting. Let's skip exploration because I haven't done it yet, and it is rather a complicated mechanical process. I've gone through the bare bones of it. Basically, there's a bunch of charts that are going to determine what your production, what the planet you find is, and it's really just roll on a bunch of charts. Okay, product sales. So product sales works similarly in that you're going to use the supply and demand table again, but things are a little different. So for product sales, first of all, remember you have to determine the price. So you determine the price by looking at the demand letter. Now, each product has a demand letter associated with it. And like I said, the higher that letter is, the further towards Z it is. Not that it goes that high, but the higher the prices you can expect, I guess, are. So let's take an example. Let's say I go here to Earth, and I've got, okay, drugs are illegal. That's what that star means. Let's say I've got fissionable materials. Well, that kind of is crappy stuff. But they want up to 6 of them. Now, multiple people can try to sell in the same place. What happens then? I'm not sure. Right, that affects the sale. I believe everything still sells. Okay, let's take a look at what we see here. So let's say their demand here for fissionables is 6. Okay, so I go to 6. Now let's say I'm just trying to sell, I don't know, 3 of them. I look up 3, cross-reference it with 6, and I'm going to get $9 each. Let's say instead a number of us are trying to sell them, and it goes up to, say, 12 of them. Well, we're only going to get $4 each at that point. Okay, they still will buy them all. They're just going to buy them at a lower price. All right. Now, what happens if it wraps beyond that? Yeah. I don't think the rules actually tell you what to do in that case. I think the assumption is you won't go that high, but certainly if the game goes long enough, you could. The game's supposed to only last like, I don't know, 10 turns or something, which isn't enough time to really get into anything. Okay. Yeah, I don't see anything that talks to you if you're trying to sell more than that goods total. You might have to try to extend the chart to do something. And then what you do is you determine what the new demand is. Well, the new demand is taken off the supply and demand table again. I have to swap batteries in a moment. The new demand is taken off of here, but instead of using the supply chart, you'll be using the demand chart. And you take the current demand number, the number they were willing to buy. So we go, we were at fissionables, they were willing to buy 6. That's minus 6. We take the demand modifier for the product. Hey, look, that's exactly the same as the starting value. Nice, because that's kind of the equilibrium point there. Seems like that's cool. And then we add any advertising. Well, advertising is something you're allowed to do after sales, but just before before this is determined. And what you do is before you roll for the good, players can expend their monies on advertising for the good. You look at the demand number, you divide the demand number by 3. Okay? And for each multiplier of that you add, that you expend on advertising, you will increase the die roll for the demand. And the die roll for the demand is just going to change that number from -1 to +2 on the demand. Of course, the higher the demand for something, the higher the price that people will get when they deliver it. But price can't be completely, it isn't calculable in the sense that other people can jump in there and determine it. Okay, I got to swap batteries before we go to exploration. Let me just see if there's anything else here. I told you the maintenance price. You're able to, you have to have a place to store your goods. So if you don't have a factor somewhere, you got to store them on ships. If you don't have a factor of ships, I don't know what happens, but you probably lose your goods or just can't even get them. Each transport ship can hold 2 goods, each scout can hold 1. All right, let's get to the exploration system as much as I can. All right, oh, and we gotta hope that like my memory card doesn't run out, because so far it hasn't been tested successfully yet. I've reformatted it, it got weird. I was able to retrieve stuff. Boy, I hope I don't lose everything somehow. But somewhere after about a half hour, it started crapping out on me. I don't know if like the disk is just corrupted beyond a half hour of whatever I generate. It's supposed to hold like 11 hours of video. So at the level that I'm doing it. Okay, so what about exploration? This is the one thing I have not done. I fiddled around to see what the market works with. Okay, first of all, if you've got a scout, you end movement in an empty square, you can explore the square. You roll 2 dice. If you roll less than or equal to the distance to the nearest star in movement points on the board, you draw one of these. And you put it on the board. There can only be one location of interest in any given square. But you can continue searching the same squares again and again. There's probably something in each one of them. You know, there's actually perhaps more room for other things. The star will have a letter code on it running from B to F. Sol is the only A-class world. Okay, you roll 2 dice on the world code to see what goods are produced at that world. And my guess is, okay, so, and that'll give you a number of goods produced, and then you also can roll for a number of goods consumed. And then you look up the world code to see what actual goods are produced or consumed at any given planet. And you also roll for the price multiplier and demand levels. There are modifiers to all these tables, and that's about it. There really isn't a lot to that. Initial price multiplier. Price multiplier doesn't change. Why is it initial? Okay, I can tell you why it might be initial. Because later in the game, as time goes on, planets can change. Okay, so one of the things you might find is D-class worlds. Those are terrestrial ecologies with no sentient species on it at the time, which means you can colonize. When you discover a D-class world, you determine the total number of D-class worlds and worlds which were at one time D-class worlds, which includes the 4 starting planets that are not Earth, that haven't made it up to A-class. Any world that's progressed to A-class is not going to be counted. You use this number as the number to be sold on Earth, and you treat it as though people are actually selling the number of D-class worlds that they've just discovered that turn, plus the number that are still growing. And that'll get you an amount of money. Now, the demand level is F, so it's very, very valuable. I don't think, yeah, there are other things that have that demand level. And you get that cash. And I believe the world then starts growing into a larger world. Now, I'm trying to see where the world goes. Okay. You're also allowed to buy ships. Not all only Earth sells ships at the beginning of the game, and it has a price multiplier and a current production, and you get to pick either scout or transport when you get one. You can't get anything fancier. There's just 2 kinds of ships in the game. They have a certain price. That nasty price multiplier, what's the effect of that? That means, I think, the production is likely to go down if people don't buy them. But if people don't buy them, you don't roll. So if there's no demand for them, they keep producing the same amount every turn, right? Okay, you can also buy factors. They cost you 10 megagrams. Now remember, that's the money. Remember, it's going to cost you 5 a turn to maintain that, or to maintain a ship, or to maintain your home planet. We have special laws. So drugs are illegal at Sol, Booster Spice on Jaal's World. When you sell an illegal commodity, you roll a die. On a 1, you're screwed. And your goods are all confiscated. You're fined $5 per unit you were trying to sell. You may not advertise these. Advertising is illegal on Alpha C. You're just not allowed to do it. Terra has a 10% sales tax. If you earned money at Sol, including for D-class worlds, you pay 1/10 of that to the United Nations. You're allowed to switch where your home office is. It starts the game on Sol, and it can only be moved to an A-class world. We haven't gotten to the expansion of economies, but at the end of any maintenance phase, you can transfer your home planet or your home office to any A-class world where you have a factor, you swap them, and you reverse the goods stored in each ship. Corporate fees, Jaal's World and Kimberly have corporation fees. If you have your home office on that, you have to spend 10 megagrams instead of 5. Why would you be there? I don't know. Alpha C will nationalize your company, and you lose the game if you try to build your home office there. Again, why would you want to do that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure why you would want to move your home office somewhere else. There really isn't much advantage to a home office. At the beginning of the game, only Sol is A-class. When developed, okay, Libertas becomes A-class on turn 5, Alpha C on turn 10, Jaal's World on turn 15, and Kimberly on turn 20, and that is listed over here, which turn they take. It takes 30 game turns for a world to progress from one category to the next, starting from when it's discovered. When a world advances a category, you roll its number of goods consumed and produced table to determine whether the goods it consumes and produces go up, and then you roll for new goods on the appropriate table. Now, this could cause some weird situations. If the tables are very carefully balanced, lower quality worlds will still keep their production and consumption that they originally had and start adding new things. And it might be that they produce and consume the same goods, which means you could start making money off them in general. Most, without a ship, you could just have a factor there producing stuff and selling it. The number of goods can never go down. When a world other than the 4 that are in known space make it to A class, it can manufacture starships. The 4 that are in known space can do that when they hit A. You roll a die, and that'll determine your price multiplier for ships. The game's victory conditions is to get monies. You get $1 for each megagram you have, 10 for each ship, 10 for each factor or home office, 2 for each unsold unit of goods, and whoever's got the most wins. There's not a lot to it. Now, immediately you start thinking, if this economic system is cool, there's all kinds of other things you can put in it. And there's also the factor of most of these trading games, etc., that I've seen, Star Trader, not Merchant of Venus, which has lots and lots of goods, and you can't dominate the markets anymore. But Star Trader, Executive Decision, Business Management, all of these have markets where you can saturate the market either by offering purchases that drive everyone else out of the market or offering sales that undercut them and drive them out of the market. So those become sort of these cutthroat, ridiculously cutthroat, monopolistic games where you're really trying to destroy the enemy before he destroys you. And basically the goal to those games becomes to lose money as slowly as possible, rather than to make money. Now, Merchant of Venus works fine making money, and I think this one will work fine making money. The problem is the economic model seems kind of apropos of nothing. It seems fairly random with all the features that it has to it. And that's really my worry, is that there won't be much fun here. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of paperwork and bookkeeping. Is that terrible? Well, Metagaming didn't know. Their answer to it was, this is an experiment. This is a paper and pencil game. Can last for days of play. This distinguishes it from other micro games, which are usually like an hour or 2, right? Let's see how you think about us trying to do weird shit. But the micro game means that it's, not a lot of risk, and it's an interesting idea. With some better components, like, some grease boards or maybe some little tracks for each planet that you would have, you could really do this up in a way that wouldn't be quite as tedious, I think, in terms of tracking stuff. The grease pencils probably would be just as bad. But I'm thinking, little cards, maybe a few less commodities involved in it, but little cards for each planet, and you track the relevant information with little sliders instead. And that puts you in more of a position of Star Trader rather than where you're keeping track of everything on paper. What are my hopes for this? I don't know. It definitely seems to avoid the problem of, it looks like it's going to avoid the problem of trying to undercut the opponents and trying to drive them out of business, which always feels ridiculous to me. On the other hand, it doesn't have that same intuitive feel that the economic systems that generate that have. The real problem with those other games is not the economic system. Business strategy and business management, which is actually the one I have these really, really cleverly developed economic systems that actually come very close to reality, with one little problem. You're not playing economic reality. You're not trying to optimize your value for your stockholders, long-term or short-term. What you're trying to do is optimize your value in relationship to 3 other companies or players or whatever, which means you can take these ridiculous tactics that, you know, in a few cases in history have applied, you know, like Standard Oil and whatnot, but have not implied in general, because there's always been the possibility that, okay, look, you know, I drove my competition out of business by slashing my prices, but my company is now so destroyed by this that anyone could start up another company making the same product and just, you know, trounce me, right? Because I no longer have the resources capable to holding that position. I don't get anything out of that monopoly in most cases. There are cases where you do. Obviously, the railroads was one. A limited resource like oil, it makes sense. But if I'm a shoemaker, well, you know, I might drive the price of leather up, but more leather will start getting made. And that's one thing that this game does, is the model shows the effect on production. Unless it's a limited resource that I'm looking at, more of it can come into play if the prices are right, right? And even with oil, that happens, you know. Hey, the prices are right. Yeah, we can drill in the Arctic, you know, or we'll try. Anyway, we'll see how much fun it is. I'm still curious about it. I don't think that it's going to solo very, very well. I think I'm going to be too busy playing with paperwork, and it's certainly not going to video very well. Send this up.